Welcome back to the Make Space Boring Show. I'm Jason Cadigan, your host, founder of this thing, Cold Star Technologies, a data science and process improvement firm. And I am here with Raphael Roettgen, founder of E2MC, which is a space venture capital and, advice firm. I think you give advice out there to space companies. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be back. I suppose we try to help the space ecosystem and the space economy in various ways with financing, with advice, and
Right.
general outreach.
Good.
I suppose is what I'm doing here right now with you.
Exactly. I mean, outreach, hey, that's what we're all about, getting the message out there. So I wanted you back on because the wheel of time has moved another notch and we are in a new month, which means that in spacewatch.global, you have a new article on investment updates in space. So what happened in June in the space investment field?
What didn't happen, and of course, helpfully, just I think about 45 minutes or an hour before us speaking here, OneWeb announced its sale as well. So we shall briefly touch upon this. I suppose we have to. But coming back to what you mentioned, which is the monthly review of space financing activity. Yes, so June was actually a reasonably slow month on the financing front. I mean, we have something like $34 million in just a handful of financing rounds. I suppose if you had to look at it from a positive point of view, it's been a nice cross section of types of companies. You have launch in there, you got remote sensing, you even have people who want to do manufacturing in space with a very small round. And also in terms of geographies, it has been a very nice mix between countries like China, actually the biggest round launch company, Canada, Italy, Israel, the US, the UK. So I suppose that's positive. Shout out also to my friends at Space Ventures who showed up here with their very first fundraising, which is going to be another space venture capital firm. At this point in time, we always welcome more space venture capital firms. We need more capital in the sector. So those guys are going to be at the very beginning, the pre-seed seed level. I'm sure we'll talk about that at some point in time in the future. But yeah, it's not been a big month in terms of absolute dollar amounts. Now, as I pointed out and sorry, I should take a step back also, I suppose, because it has been the end of a quarter, the second quarter of the year. So I suppose we should kind of review that as well. So if we add up all of the numbers for the past 3 months, we get to something like $650 million in total of space financing activities. Now, really, May came to the rescue here, the month of May, where you had 550 million or so of financing rounds. And that in turn, that includes 346 million just from SpaceX. And then top of my head, another $100 million for Ligado Networks in the US. So that's $650 million for the quarter. That compares to about $550 million for the first quarter. Also, I took a quick look just before we started here, just to remind myself who were the big fundraisers, which companies over the year to date, I suppose. And yes, SpaceX is the biggest one. I guess that's not surprising, 346 million. And that's followed by Kinéis, which is a French IoT company, 110 million. Also 110 million is AST and Science. So that's the space mobile company that wants to connect your mobile phones directly from space. Skylo, another IoT company, just over 100 million. And then Ligado, 100 million. So those top five, what you can immediately recognize, they all act in satellite communications. I'm throwing SpaceX into satellite communications here because that's arguably why investors are at this moment in time putting money into the company. It's basically the fantasy and the upside of the Starlink satellite communications network. So that's it on the financing front, I suppose. Now, the other thing I wanted to touch upon is what I mentioned in the Spacewatch Global article for June. It's been interesting because there have been a few M&A deals in the space sector, so which is of course always welcome, and I list them in the Spacewatch Global article. So for example, Astroscale bought an Israeli satellite servicing company called Effective Space Solutions. Cobham sold their radiation test unit to a similar company. Kratos acquired a satellite antenna company. Maxa bought out minorities in a 3D analytics firm they have. And then what I found very interesting, there have been a couple of deals announced by a private equity firm out of Florida called AE Industrial Partners. And they bought both Deep Space Systems as well as Made in Space. So Made in Space, well-known new space company that's focusing on manufacturing in space. And it's actually been the third acquisition this year by AE Industrial Partners. So they're very clearly executing on a roll-up strategy of space companies here, which is an interesting thing to see that somebody is doing that. And of course, there's other people who, I think we know, who have similar intentions. So that's going to be interesting for the sector. Now, a little bit unfortunately, and so I think this is all good and positive for the sector. It's a little bit frustrating that I think for none of these deals we have actual details. I think all of these details are private. Of course, space, we've had the historical problem that we don't have, much detail to show in terms of exits. Saying like, hey, look at this, investors really made a lot of money here, as you can see from the numbers. We don't have the numbers. So I certainly hope that, the guys in Made in Space made some money. My gut feel is it's probably not a cash deal. I assume it's probably an equity deal. I hope it was a good valuation. I hope they're going to make money on that at some point in time in cash in the future. Which brings us to OneWeb. Yes, so I only saw it, I think, about 45 minutes ago. So obviously the press release that came out by OneWeb, which has now been reproduced in various media outlets, is that who seems to be the winning bidder is a consortium between Bharti Airtel out of India, so very, very big mobile network operator from India, who had previously invested in OneWeb, and the UK government. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I don't know what I can say about it. I suppose I hope that will allow some of the very qualified OneWeb employees to continue their work and keep their jobs. So that's the positive side. I'm still not entirely clear what the strategy is going forward. Let me phrase it this way: I wish best of luck to the British taxpayer.
I think that's an accurate statement. Yeah, Dr. Marek Zivart was on this show over the weekend to give his opinion, and then folks can go watch that. Getting back to the Made in Space and that roll-up that you're talking about consortiums, buying up a value chain from beginning to end, right, and capturing more of that. I think it's a good thing, and it is showing that there is some kind of an exit available. The Starbridge folks that I've talked to didn't seem to be unhappy, so it may be all right, And it's kind of good to see. I mean, I'd rather see some exits than no exits, right? It shows that there is some light at the end of the tunnel.
Absolutely, and it's nice to see that you have an institution like a private equity firm providing that exit.
Mm-hmm. Well, awesome. I recommend everybody go read that article, which I will put into the description below the video. And also, if you have time, go check out the E2MC.space website. It's a beautiful website. Everybody knows that I say when something is beautiful, I like to share it. And it's informative as well. And I remember the first time I looked at it, I was startled by the number of people that you have managed to gather together, on your team. And I recommend people go look at that and learn more about it. Thanks for being here, Raphael.
Thanks, Jason. All the best. Take care.